All right, hello everyone. Welcome to another Zoo Time with Mikey and Molly. I'm Molly. Happy Earth Day. Zoo announcements, just to update you guys. We had a birthday this week. Sequoia, the bald eagle, turned 32 on Monday. So happy birthday to Sequoia. You can check out our YouTube video for our YouTube channel for a video Anne made, Teacher Anne, on her birthday. Today, we are going to be talking about animal senses. Just a reminder how this works. Mikey is moderating right now on the computer. And if you have any questions, send it to our Q&A. Don't click the raise your hand button, and please don't chat at all. Just there's a Q&A at the bottom of your screen. If you type a question, Mikey will see it. She'll save those for me until after I present with an animal. She might not be able to get to everyone's questions. I'm so sorry. And you won't be able to see the questions you won't be able to see other people's questions unless Mikey responds to them. What we didn't do last week was take a picture of all the questions. So if we don't get to your questions, we'll try to get a snapshot of them and respond in an email. So it's so good to see you all again. And I want to talk about our first animal and its cool senses that it has that we don't have. So let me grab him. Ooh, this is a Caribbean hermit crab. Let me see if I can actually scoot a little bit closer. I didn't want you to see my face, but I want you to see his face. So these guys live in the tropical Caribbean, and they're actually land hermit crabs. So they do need the ocean to breed and have babies, and their first couple larva stages are aquatic in the ocean, but they move out of the ocean and they burrow under tree roots by the shore, and they're scavengers. So you might be able to see some big claws. There's a smaller pinchy claw to help get pieces of flesh and old fruit that falls out of trees. And then this big purple claw he uses to protect himself. So he actually lives in what? What is special about a hermit crab? Can someone type to Mikey in Q&A, what do they live in? Does anyone know what a hermit crab lives in?
The ocean.
That's true, but what do they use for protection that not all other animals use for protection? There's something special about other crabs don't do this. This is a type of crustacean, but not all crustaceans do this.
Shell, breathing sand, a shell.
Yeah, they move into a snail shell. So this big shell on top is not part of the hermit crab's body. We met a tortoise last week where its shell was part of its body. This is from a West Indian top snail shell. And this hermit crab moved in to protect itself from predators who want to eat it, and also from those hard waves in the ocean that might hit it and knock it around, and maybe pieces of sand. Someone mentioned, I think Bree, that they do burrow in the sand a little bit, and that would definitely be part of their home too, part of their habitat. So they have this special shell, a snail shell, protecting their bodies. And when they're scared, they can actually pull their limbs and their body into that shell and protect it with the big purple claw. Now, pretty cool, has eyes like us. Hopefully you guys can see that. Also has 4 antennae. So insects usually have 2 antennae, but this guy has 4. 2 of them, the 2 long ones, are for feeling around, and the 2 shorter ones are a little bit more feathery, are for smelling and tasting. So he actually uses those antennae to smell and taste his food. And then he has all these hairs on his body that he uses to sense and feel vibrations. So movement. I do have a picture of another type of hermit crab. So they don't all use the same type of shells. They use the shells from snails that live in their area. So the West Indian top snail shell lives with the Caribbean hermit crabs, but other hermit crabs use other snail shells. And as the hermit crab grows bigger, it will actually need to find a new shell to move into. They want to find the shell before they come out of their old one. So they'll go and they'll look around. Sometimes 2 hermit crabs find the same shell that they both want to move into, and they'll actually fight over that shell and make little chirping noises to see who wins and who gets to move in. This front part of their body is really, really hard. They have an exoskeleton, so the bones are on the outside of their body, but the back half, their abdomen, is really soft to be able to curl up inside of these found shells that they use for protection. So soft back half, hard front half. Does anyone have any questions about them right now?
Yeah, we have some questions. The first one is, why doesn't it pinch Molly while you hold it?
He's pinching me a little bit. I'm gonna be honest. Just because I've used him a lot, so he's pretty comfortable with me, but he gets a little uncertain, and it's pinching is part of the way he senses and feels around. So he's pinched me a couple times and been like, oh wait, that's not food, and let go. So he's not breaking my skin, but if he definitely can pinch. That's a good question.
Kind of a two-part question is, can we find them at the beach? And then another question related to that is, how long can they stay underwater?
Oh, good question. So you can find hermit crabs at the beach. Not this guy. This guy's from the tropical Caribbean or the Caribbean. And we have a different type. Actually, we have a couple different types of smaller aquatic ocean hermit crabs in our tide pools that you can check out. I believe they're blue-legged hermit crabs. You'd have to look it up. But we do have tide pool hermit crabs that are much, much smaller than this guy. And then what's the second part of that question?
How long can they stay under the water?
So they actually have gills. So they can stay under the water pretty much indefinitely, and they can filter oxygen from the water using their gills. These guys have modified gills to help them breathe on land. So the real question is, how long can they stay on land? And these guys also can stay on land indefinitely because they have modified gills, but maybe aquatic hermit crabs can only stay out for 4 hours or so. You'd again have to look that up because every hermit crab species is different.
Yeah, great. There's a couple. These are really good questions. How big do they get? And then maybe again correlated. Lila wants to know, do they use any shells other than snails?
Oh, those are two really good questions. This is a large hermit crab. The other two we have are smaller. He's still growing, but I don't think he'll get much bigger than this. And this is a pretty large species for any type of hermit crab. Although there are certain types, maybe the coconut crab you can look up, that are huge, but really only in tropical areas. Here, where we have a much colder coast, they tend to be pretty small. And then the other part of that question was,
do they use other shells besides
snail shells? Besides snail shells. I think it's most common for them to use snail shells, but I think they will take advantage of whatever shell fits them that they can move into. And there might be other types of shells, possibly. Normally, it's pretty common for one type of hermit crab to move into one type of snail shell. So all the hermit crabs you see on our coast mostly move into black turban snail shells. So you'll see a lot of black shells on our hermit crabs. But you have to think about what kind of animals make shells. So there's bivalves and univalves. So bivalves are like clams and mussels and oysters that have two shells. A hermit crab wouldn't be able to move into that. But univalves, like snails, have the perfect spiral shape for them to move into. And you would just have to look up who else makes shells like that where they live. I know conch shells tend to be similar as well, but I don't know if a hermit crab could fit into a conch shell. Maybe if it was a little baby conch. It depends on the shape of the hermit crab's body and how it can fit, and the shape of the snail shell. But that's really cool. I've never thought about that.
I know we did put a conch shell in one time, and he did not like he didn't.
Oh, he didn't choose. Maybe they've evolved to choose specifically one type of shell, just because that's worked for them in the past.
Okay, we have a couple more questions, but I'm going to give you one more that's like a compound question. So, how can we tell the difference between if it's a boy or a girl? Do we know the age? Mm-hmm. And can you keep them as pets?
Okay, great questions. I don't know how to tell if they're a boy or a girl, because their boy and girl parts are actually inside the shell right now. When they breed, they actually emerge partially from the shell and they're in the water and they touch bellies, basically. They touch their abdomens to each other. But I don't want to pull him out because that's really traumatic to him and I might actually hurt him. So I'm calling it a him. It could be a her, it, they. I'm not sure. We haven't actually sexed our specific hermit crabs. They live up to 12 years old. I don't know how old this one is specifically. We've had them for about a year, but they weren't itty bitty babies when we got them. And remember, their first couple stages are in the water. Can you keep them as a pet? We have him here at the zoo. They don't make great pets because they need the ocean to breed. Even if you put a big salt pool in an enclosure with them, they wouldn't have babies. So basically, for the pet trade, people collect them from the wild, and we're depleting that wild population by taking them and bringing them into captivity. So I would not recommend having it as a pet because we can't make more of them while they're pets, if that makes sense. They might be easy to take care of. I actually don't think they are because they need really specific types of food and water. So they're not a great first choice pet, but that's a good question.
Okay. And there's a couple more, but we'll save these ones for the end.
Okay. So cool senses that they have that we don't have is the antenna. Remember, 2 of them are for smelling and tasting, and the longer ones are for feeling. And then little tiny hairs all over its body for vibrations, which is pretty cool. And they have eyes that stick up too. All right. Come on, buddy. All right. Our next animal is super cool. She's beautiful. This is our rosy boa tiki. I think some of you have actually met tikers before. She is sticking out her tongue right now. I don't know if you can see that. What does she, I have 2 questions for you that I want you to send in to me. What does she do with her tongue? Why is she sticking it out? And what shape is her tongue? Does anyone know? Let's
see. That's how she talks.
Any other guesses?
She smells.
Okay. So this might be a form of communication. Mostly what she's doing is smelling with her tongue. So we smell with our nose and we taste with our tongue. She tastes and smells with her tongue. She sticks it out and she's catching scent particles on the air and bringing them back into her mouth. And what shape? Does anyone know what shape her tongue is?
Catherine said fork.
Perfect. It's like a Y. Okay, she has 2 prongs, a forked tongue, 2 prongs at the end of her tongue. And just like we have 2 nostrils, that helps her smell in 2 directions at once. So I'll try to get a close-up picture of a snake tongue for you. So you can see that forked tongue. So remember, we have 2 nostrils for smelling. They have 2 prongs on their tongue for smelling, catching scent particles in the air. She has something called a Jacobson's organ on the roof of her mouth, and that helps her smell. It helps her sense hormones and pheromones, so chemical, olfactory reception, chemoreception. So she sticks out her tongue, she catches scent particles, she presses them to the roof of her mouth, and she processes them. The scientific name for Jacobson's organ is a vomeronasal organ. Amphibians have these, reptiles have these, and most mammals have these. We actually don't have one anymore, but a really cool thing, I've seen this happen a lot with goats and horses and giraffes, is something called the Flehmen response. So basically what happens is, to tell if a female is ready to mate, when she pees, the males will actually close their nostrils, curl their lip up like this, and they'll hold that position and they'll inhale really deeply. And these male animals try to get all of that scent from her urine right to the roof of their mouth, right to their vomeronasal organ, and tell if she's ready to mate and have babies or not. So we think of snakes as having this sensory Jacobson's organ, but other animals have it too. She's not going to use that to tell if someone wants to mate. She's going to use this to hunt. She eats little animals. She would eat mammals, birds, and any kind of lizards that she can find. And she uses her sense of smell to find those animals. And she's cool. Boas are boa constrictors. So she's a rosy boa constrictor. She's not venomous. She uses her teeth to bite her prey and hold on, and then she wraps her very strong muscular body around them, and she holds on as tight as she can, and she squeezes and gives them a big hug until their blood stops, until their heart stops circulating their blood, and then they die very quickly. She opens her mouth really wide, and she swallows her prey whole. And she's actually native. She lives around here. She's a local animal. She lives in rocky areas and usually only comes out at night. So when it's very hot and dry during the day, she'll burrow underground where it's nice and moist. And then she's really active in the warm season in the spring and summer when it's still nice and warm at nighttime to come out and hunt, which is pretty cool. Do we have any tiki questions?
Yeah. So 2 of our friends want to know, why is she so bendy?
Oh, that's such a good question. So she has lots and lots of bones. Some people think snakes don't have bones. She's full of ribs. She has ribs all the way down her body, and her organs are very stretched out. But she has all these muscles, and she uses her muscles to move around and tie herself into knots. And her bone structure, she has a lot of bones, but it's a little different than ours, and it helps her do these cool bends and stuff. But she's not made out of rubber. She's got some solid pieces in here, but snakes have just adapted to be able to curl up and fit in tight spaces. When she's scared, she actually curls into a ball and puts her head in the middle to protect herself. And she might have done that before we found her because she has this orange scar on her side. I don't know if you guys can see that. It's right here. And she's missing the tip of her tail. So it looks like someone tried to eat her and attacked her in the wild. And she was either able to curl up and protect herself or slither away and escape and maybe hide under a rock. Other questions?
Yeah. So maybe you can take these 2 together. They're not the same question, but one question is, how do you know it's a she?
Mm-hmm.
And the other one is, do they go to the bathroom? And those are a little bit connected.
They're a little bit connected because snakes have a cloaca. That's one hole for everything. And hers is covered up, but her cloaca would be right here on her belly. And that means that's where she would have babies and go to the bathroom. They sort of pee and poop at the same time, and they don't go to the bathroom very often because they only eat once every 2 weeks. So she'll go to the bathroom maybe once every 2 weeks, and it'll come out that cloaca. Good question. We brought her to the vet. They can take blood and tell if you're a boy or a girl from your blood. And they can also squeeze this cloaca and have her sexual organs come out and be able to sex her that way. A cool thing about rosy boas is they don't lay eggs. They incubate their eggs inside their body, and then the babies hatch inside of the mom, and they come out like little tiny whole snakes instead of hatching out of an egg in a nest somewhere. Another cool thing is when they grow bigger, all their old skin cells die and they shed them in one big piece. So I have a big shed from a snake. You can see its belly scales are bigger than its back scales. And snakes don't have any eyelids. They can't blink. Please don't get into a staring contest with a snake because you will lose. So when they shed, they actually shed a clear scale covering their eye to protect it from debris or wind that might get into it. And I have a snake shed where you can actually see the eyes in the face right there. I don't know if it's clear. That's from a gopher snake. So all snakes do this. One of our snakes has an extra sensory organ to help it hunt little animals, its prey. And ball pythons have these little holes on its face. And those are heat pits. So mammals like little mice and rats and ground squirrels and gophers and yummy things to eat create heat from our body, which snakes and other cold-blooded ectotherms don't. And they can actually use those pits on their face to sense heat, and it's almost like they're seeing in infrared. Maybe I can pull this. This is a cat in infrared. So you can see all that red and yellow is heat that cat is making, especially around its heart. And so that's how a snake with heat pits would see a cat and know that there was yummy, yummy prey right in front of it to eat. Although a cat would be pretty big. They'd mostly be looking for mice and rats. Other questions?
Yeah. So we have, does she bite? And then is she friendly, connected? And then we have a couple, how old is she?
Okay. So she is so friendly. She's actually one of my favorite snakes in the zoo. Don't tell Devin, that's Mikey's favorite.
Yeah.
But I really love Tiki. I've never had any issues with her. She's just such an easygoing, chill little sweetheart. She can bite. She has never ever bit anyone, but she has to, any humans, I should say. She's never bit a human that we know of, but she has to eat her food. And she needs to be able to hold on to it. Does she have any arms or legs? See any arms? See any legs? Nope. Okay. So she needs to use those teeth to hold on to her prey to eat it, and she needs to swallow it. She doesn't chew, but she will bite to hold on. Her first defense, if she's scared, is to curl into a ball. So if you, and she musks. If you pick her up in the wild, she'll make a really, really nasty smell all over you and make you super stinky. And she'll do that before she'll bite you. That doesn't, you still should not pick one up in the wild ever, because you don't want to get that stinky musk on you and you don't want to scare or hurt them. But she only bites to eat normally. In a really extreme situation, she might strike to defend herself, but I've never even seen her curl up to pretend to strike. She's just so chill. And then was there a third part to that question?
Oh, we had a couple.
I actually don't know. We found her in a parking lot, so we're not sure how old she is, but they usually live about 30 years.
Okay. And then the last question we'll do on Tiki is, what do we feed her here? Or what
We
do we feed our snakes?
Feed her mice. They're all dead. So if you feed a live animal to a zoo snake, it can be dangerous. So what happens in the wild is when a snake is hunting, their prey, the food they're trying to eat, will either fight back or flee. Normally they'll try to run away and the snake will be able to catch them. When we put a live animal in her cage with her and that animal can't run away, it will turn around and fight her. And even if she's able to win, it could really bite or scratch and damage and hurt her, and we don't want that. So what we do is we get dead mice that have been frozen and we warm them up, and then we wiggle them in front of her with long tongs, or we'll put it on a dish and let her eat it herself, and she'll wrap around it and she'll swallow a yummy warm mouse.
Beautiful. Yeah. And then there's last question. How do you know if she has a baby?
She only can have babies if she's with a boy. So we talked about walking sticks last time where the girls can make babies by themselves. She can't do that. So she's all by herself. And so we would never see her have babies. If she's pregnant, she'd get heavier and she'd be thicker. And we actually weigh them regularly so that we can help monitor their health, that make sure they're not losing too much weight, make sure they're not gaining too much weight. And then we would actually see live babies come out. At some point, there'd be multiple snakes in there with her if she had babies, but she can't because she lives alone. She doesn't live with a boy.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to bring out our last animal. Oh, yeah. Here you go. Our last animal is a mammal. And if you were here last week, our new mammal protocol, just to make sure that I don't give them any bad germs right now, is to wear gloves and a mask. And I think you were still able to hear me last week, even when I had my mask on, and hopefully everything will go well this week. Mammals have fur on their bodies. Their mommies make milk to feed the babies. They have a hard backbone. Those are some of the things that are special about mammals. Like us, we're mammals. I'm taking my glasses off so I don't fog them up. Come on, Harley. This is our mammal this week. This is Harley. Harley is a bunny rabbit. Say hi, Harley. You might see his nose moving around quite a bit, gathering in all those good smells. And he has these long whiskers he uses for feeling. Yeah, Harley. So he uses his whiskers kind of like how the hermit crab uses its antenna. Harley's eyes are on the side of his head, and he can see in almost 360 degrees, almost in a full circle. He has a blind spot right here in front of his face, right in between his eyes, but he can see almost all the way around his whole head. That's because bunnies are prey animals. They're always getting hunted for food. Remember, our ferrets love eating bunnies. So he needs to be able to see a predator who's coming up and sneaking up on him. So that's why his eyes are on the side. If you are a hunter, you're a predator, your eyes are going to be in the front, and that gives you binocular vision to be able to focus in on prey that you're chasing. So I have a question for you guys. Are we prey with eyes on the side of our head, or are we predators with eyes in the front? Where are yours? Are you hunters or are you hiders? Where are your eyes?
Cheyenne says predators.
Yeah, we're hunters. So even if you guys have chosen not to eat meat because we're omnivores and we can mostly eat plants, we still have the body and the senses to be a hunter and be able to chase things and focus in on them. You might have noticed his big, beautiful ears. He can hear way better than we can. He can hear anyone coming to sneak up on him. And he can swivel these ears in 2 different directions at once and hear from different parts. So he can swivel this one forward and this one backwards and be able to hear both ways. A really cool defense he has is all this fur. If anyone tries to grab him, all this fur flies into the air. There's some chunks flying around. It's so white though, I don't think you can see it in the camera. But he has there's some chunky fur right here. So if you're an animal like a bird with talons who tries to grab him, you're gonna get talonfuls, fistfuls of fur, and you're gonna run off or fly off with a bunch of fur and not a rabbit snack. Or if you try to bite him, you're gonna get a mouthful of fur and not any bunny. So that's one way they defend themselves. Bunnies live in holes underground, series of connected burrows called warrens with many different exits and entrances to the surface. And all of these tunnels connect different rooms. So they have rooms for sleeping in, and they have rooms for having babies in. Their babies are called kits, so rooms for raising their kits. And sometimes these warrens can be 10 feet underground and as big as a tennis court. And lots of bunnies will live in there together. Does anyone have any bun questions?
Okay. So we have, what other predators eat bunnies?
Yeah, so there are a lot of bunnies in North America. So any of our coyotes, bobcats, mountain lions around here would totally love a yummy bunny snack. Maybe on the East Coast, a fisher cat could get them. Places where they have wolves eat bunnies too. So any kind of predator that's big enough to catch and eat them will eat a bunny. And sometimes birds like eagles and hawks will go for the babies, will go for the kits and try to get those. And the rabbits try to keep the kits underground to protect them from predators.
Okay. Why does he have black spots?
He is called Harley because he has a harlequin pattern. So he's a domestic rabbit, and we bred them to have lots of different colors and patterns. And this is just the color and pattern he was born with. So this is one of our types of harlequin patterns that he has. I think it's so cute. He has a big splooch on his nosy boops and then 2 splotches around his eyes, and his ears are black, and I am so in love with him. He's such a sweetheart, but if he was attacked and he needed to protect himself, he does have very long claws, very long sharp claws that he can scratch a predator with. And his teeth never stop growing. He's an herbivore, so he only eats plants, and he eats really rough forage, roughage, and he chews. And if he didn't have enough rough forage to eat, his teeth would keep growing and they'd actually grow through his head. But luckily, he eats enough rough things that doesn't happen, and they stay nice and short. But his teeth continuously grow throughout his whole life. Oh, sorry, I kicked the camera.
What happens to the babies if a predator snatches them off?
Oh, the babies unfortunately would probably die because they don't have mama's milk to feed them. If they were weaned, it's possible they'd be able to live on their own if they were already eating plants, but without mama to protect them, they're more susceptible to predators. They might get cold. They might not know how to survive. So until they're ready to leave mom, they need mom around to teach them how to be a bunny and how to live. And without mom, all the babies would probably die too, unfortunately.
What do his whiskers do?
They feel. They're for tactile sensation. So he uses them to feel around, just like that the hermit crab uses those long antennae to feel. He has whiskers for feeling, and he even has eyebrow whiskers. See if I can get your eyebrow whiskers, your little nosy whiskers. Any other questions?
Does he have a girlfriend?
No, he lives by himself. We used to have other bunnies who lived with them. Rabbits can be incredibly territorial. So if you move in a new rabbit with them, they might not like them. I think in our new zoo, we'll try to find some new friends with him, but we have to be really careful, and we have to make an exhibit where we can separate them if they don't get along.
Okay. And then the last one is, how old is he?
You know how old he is? I think 4 or 5.
Yeah, I was going to say 4 years old.
I think he's 4. We had an older rabbit. They live about 10 years usually, so not super old. Our hermit crabs live longer than our bunnies. Okay. All right, our last thing is a really, really special project from Teacher Mikey. So I'm going to hold Harley for a second and let her get set up, and then I'm going to hop off and she's going to do a really cool demo. So remember how he has eyes that are kind of like ours, except for they're on the side of his head for hiding, and ours are on the front for hunting. Thank you for bearing with us, friends.
All right, and we're gonna see, this is gonna be my table here. Okie dokie. And what we are gonna do actually is an eyeball dissection. How does that look? Can you see that without a glare? Eyeballs are super important when we talk about senses, because our eyes are actually, for most of us, our primary sense that we use. If you walk into a room that you've never been into before and it's unfamiliar, you're going to see things you've never seen before. You're going to smell things that maybe you haven't smelled before. You're going to be able to touch things in that room. But the first thing that's going to talk to our brain is actually going to be our eyes. So if you walk into a new place, for the majority of the population, our eyes are the primary sense we use to communicate with our brain. And animals have very different eyes. Some animals have really good eyesight, like birds of prey sometimes have great eyesight, but a lot of animals don't rely heavily on their sense of sight. All 3 animals that you met today, their sense of sight is not going to be their primary sense. It's going to be a secondary or lower down sense. So we're going to look at a cow eyeball. And the reason we look at cow eyeballs is because their eyes are actually very similar to our eyes. There's a couple differences that we'll go through, and I'll tell you what some of the differences are. But for the most part, there's a lot of similarities. So let me grab and I'm gonna put on gloves because the eyeballs come in formaldehyde, and so they're gonna be covered in some chemicals. Okay. So I have 2 eyeballs in here because I'm going to cut into one, but I want to actually keep one intact so I can show you. So this is what the cow eyeball looks like. And obviously it's out of the animal. We get these from the butcher because people eat a lot of meat, a lot of cow, and they don't eat the eyeball. So we get to use this extra part here. So when I squeeze it, if you watch me squeeze it, it's actually very, let me see if I can do this a tiny bit. Okay, It's actually really, really muscular. I can squeeze very hard on it, and I'm just squeezing all around the muscle here. So I'm gonna take this and I'm actually gonna cut off this first outer layer. And the first outer layer is something called a cornea. And on our eyes, if you look at like someone in the rooms with you eyes, we have a cornea, but our cornea is not as thick as this, because cows are animals that eat off of the ground. They get a lot of dust and a lot of dirt in their eye. So they have their cornea is about 4 times as thick as a human cornea. We both have the part, but theirs is a lot thicker because they have to basically protect themselves. And you might be able to tell as I cut, there's a lot of liquid coming out. There are 2 primary liquids in a cow eyeball. The first one is just, it's pretty thin. It's almost like water, and it presses against the cornea and it gives the eye its shape. You'll see once I take this cornea off, the eye will actually lose a lot of its like strength and structure, because the cornea is kind of like the first line of defense into an eyeball. Okay. So if you can see this, this is the cornea, and it's not always this kind of cloudy. A part of it is because it's been in the formaldehyde, but like I said, it's pretty thick. I don't know if you can see. It's hard for me. Like if I wanted to tear it right now, it's very, very strong. I'm not gonna be able to tear it. So that's the first part. Let me see if I can show you inside. So inside we have a couple more parts I'm going to pull out. We have something called the pupil. And if you look at your own eye in a mirror, the pupil looks black to us. It's actually a hole. It's actually like an empty center. And let me see if I can grab this out. It's almost in a perfect circle here. So our eyes, our pupils are circular. They are in a circle, and a cow's is actually closer to an oval. So this is the pupil here, and if I put it here, you can actually see how it is in fact a hole. There's a center in the middle. So they look black because of how the light reflects and constricts in the eye, but that's the pupil. And people can have different color irises around the pupil. So some people have brown eyes or blue eyes or green eyes. Cows almost always have brown eyes. So that's the pupil. And this, again, this is a thin part. Compared to the cornea, I can actually tear this fairly easily. It's not super thick. But theirs are ovals and ours are circular. So similar shapes. There's some animals, goats, I believe, actually have rectangular pupils. So it's pretty cool. They're not always circular like shapes. Sometimes they can be different shapes. Catfish have really weird ones if you Google like catfish pupil. So the next thing, I'm just gonna fish it out of here. It's sitting right here, and this is again in like a pool of liquid here. I don't know if you guys can tell, but there's a lot of liquid inside of there. And that kind of helps, like I said, keep the eye really lubricated in its shape. As people get older, a lot of times they'll develop problems with their eyes, and part of that is due to that liquid in there actually evaporating and drying out. We don't have as much. So I'm gonna pull out, this is maybe the strongest part inside of the eye. This is the lens. So we also have a lens in our eye, and your lens is responsible for helping you focus. So if you are like at a park and you're looking at something really far in the distance, this is the part of your eye that's going to help you focus on what you're looking at. Even if you're reading and you're kind of straining to look at what's in the print, this part of your eye helps you to focus on things, called the lens. And we use lenses in different things too. We try to mimic the eye in like things like cameras or even glasses. If you wear glasses, like I have glasses on my face, these help to correct part of my vision, right, in the lens. Okie dokie. I'm gonna get the rest of this liquid out of here. Can you see that? It's very gelatinous. This is the secondary liquid that's inside of the eye. And it might be really hard to tell. It actually feels like jello though, or jelly. It's really thick. It's not as thin as that first one. And that is at the back of the eye. And so I'm gonna cut into this. This is a part of the eye that we human beings don't actually have in our eye. Cows have it, and animals that live deep in the ocean tend to have it, or animals that are incredibly nocturnal. And it's beautiful. It's something called a tapetum lucidum. And I'm going to see if I can open. I'm just trying to scrape off all the cells back here. The retina are like the cells at the back of the eyeball. But inside, you have this very, very pretty. Can you see that? Let me see if I can cut into it a little more. Yeah. It reminds me of like abalone shell. I wonder if I shine. There we go.
Yeah.
You can see how pretty it is. It kind of has this like blue or teal color to it. And so like I said, that's called a tapetum lucidum. And what happens is that this helps animals that are either awake at night or don't have a lot of light, thank you so much, Miss Molly, to double reflect the light. So if you ever see pictures of a cat's eye shining at night, the light actually comes in and it hits this part back here and it reflects back out, and it helps them to get a really fine image of what they're seeing, things in the dark. So we don't have that. If I come around a corner in the dark, you're not going to see my eyes glow, but a lot of animals' eyes you will see glow, and that's what you're seeing. That glow is the reflection of that cool part on the back of their eye. The last thing I'll show you, which is maybe arguably the most important part of the eye, is this right here. And this is our, oh my goodness, Molly, the word has left my head. What is,
your nerve?
Yeah, but occipital nerve. The occipital nerve at the back of the head. So what this does is it actually goes out from behind the eyeball and connects to the brain. It's almost like a telephone. So like I said, we use our sight really heavily. When you walk into a room and you see like, this is a safe room, there's a lot of light, there's a lot of color. This little cord here, this little nerve is the one that talks to your brain. And that's true of all of our senses. When you smell something, there are parts inside of your nose that communicate with your brain, or same with your hand. When you touch something and you feel that's hot or that's cold, it's what it's the pieces of your body are talking to your brain. This is called an optical nerve. That was that's occipital is part of your brain. The optical nerve is what it is called. Thank you very much. So that comes out and it connects to the brain, and it's like very important, because if we didn't have that part, our eyes wouldn't be able to perceive sense at all. Okay. Are there any questions about our eyeballs or cow eyeballs or the dissection in general? I'm going to show you one more picture. I mentioned that one of the differences between our eyes and cow eyes is the shape of the pupil. One of them is that we don't have the tapetum lucidum, but the other one that I think is really cool is we actually have 2 more muscles that connect to our eyes than cows do. So human beings have 6 muscles that let them, and this is a picture of the 6 different muscles. And the really cool thing is cows have 4 muscles that connect to their eyes, and we have 6. So what we can do that cows can do is we can look up, we can look down, we can look side and side. But what we can also do that cows cannot do is roll our eyes one way or the other. We can get a whole movement. You can look at the top and bottom corners, and they actually can't do that roll like we can. And those 2 extra muscles we have that connect to our eye is what allows us to do that. Okay. If we have any questions, we'll take those. And if not, we can get back to some of our questions from earlier.
Yeah, it's someone asked, how bright can cat eyeballs get when it's dark out? Are you asking? Are you grabbing the picture, Mikey?
Yeah. So this is actually a really cool picture. It shows, you can see the reflection. So like when there's dark around it, and you can, in the corner here, it shows actually the tapetum lucidum, which is what does the reflection. So they can get very bright. I don't know how you would measure the brightness on that, but like if I'm in the dark, you're not going to be able to see my eyes even a little bit, no matter how like glossy or bright they are. So it is really that part at the back of their body that lets them be able to do that.
Which animal has the biggest eyeball?
The biggest eyeball, my guess, is going to be the blue whale, only because that is the largest animal on Earth, and so their eyes are going to have to be really, really, really big too. It would be interesting to learn which animal has the biggest eye-to-body ratio. So even though the blue whale has the biggest eyes, because they're the biggest, I'm not sure. I'm sure that there's an animal that has a bigger eye-to-body ratio, which means that compared to how big their body is, their eyes would be bigger than that comparatively.
That has a really big eye-to-body ratio.
Okay, I was like,
oh yeah.
So this is something called a tarsier. I think it's a type of primate. Yeah. Okay. And they have, you can see they have a very big eye-to-body ratio. Okay.
And then that guy has a huge eye.
This is a giant squid, the colossal squid. Oh, wow. So this says the colossal squid has the largest eyes in the animal kingdom, which means that they actually have a larger eye than a blue whale. Okay, Miss Molly, are there any other questions?
Well, that one is also the rectangular pupil, if you want to show the rectangular pupil. So, yeah, those are. I think we had a Rod chime in with an answer.
Yes, a Rod
said
said
optic nerve and tarsiers are the largest eye to body.
so this actually is the largest eye to body ratio out of all the animals. These guys have a bigger eye to body than any other animal.
All right. Someone said colossal squid. What is the water in the cow's eyeball?
Oh, okay. So that's a good question. They're not really water. The first liquid that comes out. So one of them is called the aqueous humor, and one of them is called the aqueous vitreous, I believe. And the first one, vitreous humor, the first one that comes out is basically just kind of, it looks like water. It's just like very thin and very clear liquid. And like I said, that just kind of keeps the cornea pressed out and to keep its shape. The second one that came out, if you guys were able to see this really, really jelly one here, that one actually is what keeps the eye hydrated. So that doesn't press up against the cornea. That's kind of back behind the lens. So you have like almost like a front liquid and a back or a middle liquid. And that one is what gives the eye all of its like hydration and keeps it really healthy. When that starts to go away, that kind of jelly liquid, that's when a lot of eye problems can develop.
And someone asked how many inches is the whale eye, and I'm going to Google that.
Okay, Molly's going to look up a whale eye. The colossal squid, it did have
it's only about 6 inches.
6 inches, and ours is about an inch, I believe.
Size of a baseball. That's actually really small. So blue whales don't have very big eyes.
Okay, good to know. It says that the colossal squid has the largest eyes in the animal kingdom at 30 centimeters across, bigger than a dinner plate with a lens the size of an orange. But only juveniles have been found so far, which is really crazy because that means we don't even know how big an adult could get. I mean, if you only find juveniles, that means the adult eyes could be much, much larger. Says they have a built-in headlight, which is called a photophore, which can produce enough light for the squid to see its prey in the dark. So these guys live where it's really, really dark in the deep ocean. And so they have like kind of like a built-in light to help them. Okay.
Any more eye questions? I don't have any questions in the Q&A, but
yeah,
I think
okay.
We're about to wrap up.
Yeah, we're about to wrap up. Thank you guys so much for joining us again. We're gonna stay on for about 10 minutes, and we're gonna monitor the Q&A. So if there are any questions from earlier that you really wanted answered that you didn't get to answer, or anything else, if you want to send us feedback, those of you that were here last week, we had said we would hang out so that we can get anonymous feedback. If you'd like to send that here. So we're just going to leave this on for about 10 minutes, and we'll monitor it. But otherwise, thank you guys so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week with more animals and a different lesson.
Someone said, what is the smallest eye, which I'm sure belongs to some sort of mite, but this is an interesting one.
So Molly said probably a mite, which is a type of arachnid, an invertebrate. It's probably not something that has bones. Is this? Oh, it's a mole. So you can see this is a picture of a mole, and it has very, 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 very hard to see eyes, right? There are actually some, you might know this, Molly, the salamanders that don't have eyes. Okay, there are some salamanders. They live in caves. A lot of times people call them commonly like blind cave salamanders. They're super cool to look up. They don't have any eyes on their body. They basically use all their other senses besides their sight, and they're really trippy.
Yeah, it looks like there's a Texas blind salamander.
Texas blind salamander might be one of them.
I forgot to show this picture of the whiskers on the bundle.
Oh, here's from earlier, a whisker picture of our.
So cute. You guys can. Someone said, "What is the DNA of a rabbit?" Are you asking for the 4 letters? Do you know anything about rabbit DNA, Mikey? Okay, that's something I have to Google. So rabbit DNA, it might be the same as our DNA. That might be a research question. I think the rabbit DNA would probably be pretty similar to our DNA.
Yeah, and I think that is it for this week. We'll hang out. Let us know any other questions you have. Okay, friends, thank you so much. I'm gonna leave the meeting from this screen, but our moderator screen will still be on, so we can type back questions, or you're welcome to send feedback there, okay? Thank you very, very much, and we'll see you guys next week. That's wonderful.